What happens when a galaxy's most advanced civilization finally encounters the one species they never expected to fear? For 3,000 years, the Kethmori Collective had cataloged every known species across 7 galaxies. We were the Watchers, the Record Keepers, the neutral observers who documented the rise and fall of civilizations with clinical detachment. Our neural networks could process battlefield data in nanoseconds. Our probability engines could predict the outcome of any conflict with 99.7% accuracy. Until we met humanity. Commander Zexthal of the Observation Corps thought this would be just another routine assignment. Document a primitive species' first interstellar war, file the report, move on. The humans had barely mastered faster-than-light travel, still used projectile weapons, and showed concerning levels of emotional volatility in their decision-making processes. The Draknari Empire, by contrast, had conquered 47 star systems with their disciplined legions and advanced plasma technology. The mathematics were simple. Complete human extinction within 72 standard hours. But mathematics, as Zexthal would soon discover, had never accounted for what humans call the human spirit. This is the classified report that shook the foundations of the collective. The testimony that forced us to rewrite everything we thought we knew about warfare, courage, and the terrifying beauty of a species that simply refuses to surrender. Commander Zexthal's sensory appendages twitched with anticipation as the observation vessel Silent Witness dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Through the ship's bioneural interface, streams of data flowed directly into his consciousness. Stellar composition, planetary masses, electromagnetic signatures, and, most importantly, the chaotic chatter of primitive radio communications emanating from the third planet. Earth, he whispered, the human word feeling strange on his vocal synthesizers. The planet hung before them like a blue-green jewel, swirled with white clouds and teeming with an energy signature unlike anything in the collective's vast databases. Commander, his aide Vextal, materialized beside him, her form shifting from the ship's communication matrix. The Draknari fleet has been detected approaching from the Centauri vector. Estimated arrival, 14 standard hours. Zexthal's 4 eyes focused independently on the tactical display. The Draknari war fleet was impressive even by collective standards. 200 ships ranging from nimble destroyers to the massive dreadnought Worldrender. Their commander, Warlord Kesvak, had earned his rank by turning populated worlds into radioactive glass. And the human response? Zexthal inquired, already knowing the answer would be fascinating. Unprecedented, sir. Vextal's emotional dampeners couldn't quite hide her confusion. Instead of attempting to flee or negotiate, they appeared to be preparing for battle. The main display shifted to show Earth's orbital space. What Zexthal saw defied every predictive model the collective possessed. The humans had somehow mobilized their entire planetary defense force in mere hours. Ships of wildly varying designs, some clearly military, others hastily converted civilian vessels, were taking defensive positions around their homeworld. Analysis indicates they've armed cargo haulers with nuclear weapons, Vextal continued. Passenger liners are being fitted with kinetic projectile systems. Even their orbital research stations are being equipped for combat. Zexthal felt his probability processors struggling to compute the tactical value of such makeshift preparations. By every logical measure, it was suicide. The human fleet numbered perhaps 300 vessels, but most were inferior in every measurable way to Draknari technology. Sir, the communications officer's voice carried a note of bewilderment. We're receiving a transmission from Earth. It appears to be directed at us. Impossible d'exclure rapide. Our stealth systems are playing transmission now, Commander. The view screen flickered to life, showing a human male in a blue military uniform. His face bore scars that spoke of previous battles, and his eyes held an intensity that made Zexthol's natural camouflage reflex activate involuntarily. To the unknown observers watching from Grid Reference 7, Alpha 9, the human began, his voice carrying across the vast emptiness of space. This is Admiral Chinwei of the United Earth Defense Force. We know you're there, and we know you're not with the incoming hostiles. Vextal's form flickered with shock. How could they possibly? My question for you is simple, Admiral Chin continued, seemingly staring directly at Zexthal through the screen. Are you here to watch us die, or are you here to see us fight? The transmission ended, leaving the observation deck in stunned silence. In 3,000 years of documenting conflicts across the galaxy, no species had ever detected a collective observation vessel, much less addressed its crew directly. Commander, the tactical officer reported, Draknari advanced scouts have entered the outer system. The humans are responding. Zexthal watched as a squadron of human fighters engaged the scout ships. The encounter should have been over in seconds. Draknari vessels were faster, better armed, and protected by energy shields that could deflect most primitive weapons. Instead, he witnessed something that would haunt his memory circuits for years to come. The human fighters didn't engage conventionally. They came in low and fast, using the gravitational pull of asteroids to mask their approach. When the Draknari opened fire, the humans scattered like startled insects, only to reform moments later in attack formation. Fascinating, Zexthal murmured. They're using unpredictability as a tactical advantage. One human fighter, its hull scarred and atmosphere bleeding from multiple hits, performed what the collective's computers classified as a catastrophic trajectory failure. Instead of attempting to escape, the pilot aimed his dying ship directly at a Draknari destroyer. He's going to ram them, Vextal whispered. The collision was spectacular. The human fighter, no larger than a Draknari shuttle, struck the destroyer's shield generator with such force that both vessels erupted in brilliant flame. The destroyer, now vulnerable, was quickly overwhelmed by the remaining human fighters. Impossible d'exclure rapide. The tactical computers show no scenario where that exchange results in human victory. Perhaps, Vextal suggested, the tactical computers have never encountered humans before. As if summoned by her words, another transmission reached them from Earth. This time, it was a different human, a woman with graying hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of worlds. To our silent witnesses, she began, I am President Sarah Martinez. In approximately 12 hours, our world will face an enemy that outguns us, outmatches us, and outnumbers us. Every strategic analysis says we should surrender. Every logical calculation says we should flee. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a quality that Zexthol's emotional analyzers couldn't quite categorize. But logic has never been humanity's strongest suit. We're the species that walked out of caves and decided to fly to the stars. We're the children of explorers who crossed vast oceans without knowing what lay beyond the horizon. We're the descendants of individuals who looked at impossible odds and said, watch me. The camera pulled back to show the view behind her. Earth's blue curve stretching into the darkness, dotted with the lights of defending ships. If you're here to document our end, President Martinez concluded, you're going to be disappointed. If you're here to witness something unprecedented in galactic history, then welcome to the show. As the transmission ended, Zexthal found himself experiencing something his species had engineered out of their psychology millennia ago: curiosity mixed with anticipation. The collective prided itself on predictable outcomes, but every calculation regarding human behavior produced conflicting results. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "the main Draknari fleet has entered the system. Warlord Kesvac is transmitting on all frequencies." The screen shifted to show a massive reptilian figure in black armor, his scarred features twisted in disdain. Behind him, the bridge of his dreadnought bustled with activity as his crew prepared for what they clearly expected to be a brief engagement. "Inhabitants of the third planet," Kesvac's voice rumbled with authority, "I am Warlord Kesvac of the Draknari Empire. Your system now belongs to the Empire. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will turn your world into a monument to imperial power." The response from Earth came not from any official channel, but from what appeared to be civilian radio frequencies across the planet. Thousands of voices speaking in dozens of languages, all saying variations of the same thing: "Go to hell. Come and take it. Bring it on. Try us." Zexthal's probability processors overloaded, trying to analyze the tactical implications of an entire species unanimously choosing death over surrender. In the collective's extensive databases, containing detailed records of 47,000 intelligent species, not one had ever displayed such unified defiance in the face of certain extinction. "Commander," Vextal's voice carried a tremor of uncertainty, "the Draknari are beginning their attack run. Should we maintain position?" Zexthal studied the tactical display one more time. 200 of the galaxy's most advanced warships bearing down on 300 hastily armed human vessels. The outcome was mathematically certain, predetermined by the laws of physics and military science. So, why did his instincts tell him that he was about to witness something that would change everything? "Maintain position," he ordered, "and begin comprehensive recording on all frequencies. Something tells me the Collective Council is going to want to see every second of what happens next." As the Draknari fleet entered Earth's orbital space, Zexthal noticed something his sensors had initially dismissed as background noise. It was music broadcast from the human ships on open frequencies. Not martial hymns or battle cries, but something more complex. Songs about home, about standing together, about refusing to bow down. "Curious," he mused. "They're sharing emotional reinforcement patterns before battle." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "Admiral Chun is transmitting again." The scarred human admiral appeared on screen once more, but this time he stood on what was clearly the bridge of a warship. Through the viewport behind him, the approaching Draknari fleet was visible as a constellation of menacing lights. "To whoever is watching," Chun said, his voice calm despite the approaching doom, "you're about to see something that no species in the galaxy has ever witnessed. You're about to see humanity cornered." He smiled, and something in that expression sent an involuntary shudder through Zexthal's exoskeleton. "And there is nothing in this universe more dangerous than a human who has nothing left to lose." The transmission ended just as the first Draknari plasma bolts lanced across space toward the human defense fleet. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and Commander Zexthal of the Kethmori Collective was beginning to suspect that his routine observation mission was about to become anything but routine. The last thing he saw before the battle erupted in earnest was a single human fighter, its hull painted with the image of an ancient Earth predator, a shark with its mouth open, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Beneath the image, painted in letters his translation Matrix rendered as, "Come and take a bite." Zexthal settled deeper into his observation pod, knowing that he was about to witness either the extinction of humanity or something so extraordinary that it would rewrite the collective's understanding of warfare itself. He was beginning to hope it would be the latter. The first Draknari plasma salvo should have ended the battle before it truly began. Zexthal watched through his ship's sensors as brilliant emerald death lanced across the void toward the human fleet. His tactical computers calculated impact times, energy dispersion patterns, and casualty projections with mechanical precision. 97 human vessels would be destroyed in the opening exchange. The human formation would collapse, their morale would shatter, and the remainder would either flee or surrender within minutes. None of that happened. Instead, Zexthal witnessed something that broke his understanding of military doctrine. As the plasma bolts streaked toward their targets, the human fleet scattered, not in panic, not in retreat, but in what could only be described as controlled chaos. Ships peeled off in seemingly random directions, their movements defying every principle of formation flying. Impossible, Vextal breathed beside him. They're abandoning their defensive positions. But they weren't abandoning anything. As Zexthal watched in growing amazement, the scattered human ships began weaving between the plasma bolts with an almost organic fluidity. Cargo haulers equipped with oversized engines performed barrel rolls that should have torn them apart. Passenger liners dropped into impossibly steep dives, using planetary gravity to accelerate beyond their design specifications. Most incredibly, they were coordinating their movements without any detectable command structure. Each ship seemed to know instinctively where every other ship would be, creating gaps in their formation at the exact moment plasma bolts passed through empty space. How are they doing this? Vextal demanded, her processors struggling to analyze the tactical data. Unknown, Zexthal admitted. The coordination required for such maneuvers would necessitate a quantum entanglement communication network, but our sensors detect no such technology. On the main display, the Draknari formation maintained its disciplined advance, their ships moving in the precise geometric patterns that had conquered 47 worlds. Warlord Kesvak's tactical doctrine was based on overwhelming firepower delivered with mechanical efficiency. It had never failed. It was about to. The human response came from an unexpected quarter. Instead of returning fire immediately, 3 squadrons of converted mining vessels accelerated toward the Draknari flanks at velocities that should have liquefied their crews. These ships, originally designed to haul asteroid ore, had been fitted with what appeared to be the most primitive weapons Zexthal had ever seen. Are those projectile launchers? Vextal asked in disbelief. Kinetic impactors, Zexthal confirmed. Chemical propulsion systems firing metallic slugs. Technology that predates energy weapons by several thousand years. The mining ships opened fire, and thousands of metal projectiles filled the space between the fleets. To Zexthal's trained eye, it looked like a desperate waste of ammunition. The slugs moved slowly compared to energy weapons, and the Draknari shields could easily deflect such primitive attacks. Then he noticed something that made his blood synthesizers skip a cycle. The projectiles weren't aimed at the Draknari ships. They were aimed at points in space where the Draknari ships would be in 37 seconds. Predictive firing patterns, he whispered. They're not shooting at where their enemies are. They're shooting at where their enemies will be. The first Draknari destroyer flew directly into a cloud of kinetic projectiles moving at 17,000 meters per second. Its shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, absorbed some of the impacts but couldn't disperse the raw kinetic force. Metal slugs punched through weakened sections, venting atmosphere and setting off secondary explosions. Clever, Zexthal admitted. Energy shields are designed to absorb and redirect beam weapons, but kinetic energy must be absorbed or deflected mechanically. The Draknari formation wavered as 3 more ships took critical damage from the projectile swarms. Warlord Kesvak's voice crackled across the communication channels, barking orders in his species' harsh tongue. Primitive tactics, the warlord snarled. Scatter formation Alpha 7. Show these mammals what real warfare looks like. The Draknari fleet split into smaller attack groups, exactly as their doctrine prescribed. It was a textbook response to unconventional weapons. Divide your forces to present multiple targets and reduce the effectiveness of area denial weapons. The humans have been waiting for exactly that response. As the Draknari ships separated, the human fleet suddenly reformed. Not into their original defensive positions, but into something Zexthal had never seen before. The converted cargo ships and passenger liners arranged themselves into a 3-dimensional web, with the smaller fighters weaving between them like electrons around atomic nuclei. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the human formation is dynamic. It's constantly changing shape and composition. Zexthal studied the pattern, his analytical mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. It's not a formation, he realized. It's an organism. They're functioning as a single entity. The first Draknari attack group, 12 destroyers in diamond formation, bore down on what appeared to be an isolated cluster of human ships. The destroyers' plasma cannons charged to full power, preparing to vaporize the foolish mammals who had wandered too far from their main force. Instead, they flew into a trap that existed only because 300 human captains had somehow agreed on a plan without speaking to each other. As the Draknari destroyers opened fire, the isolated human ships suddenly weren't isolated anymore. Fighters that had been hidden behind larger vessels erupted from concealment, their missile tubes launching everything they carried. Simultaneously, the human ships that had appeared vulnerable revealed themselves to be anything but helpless. The cargo hauler Maria Santos had been fitted with a mining laser powerful enough to cut through asteroids. As a Draknari destroyer passed within range, the laser punched through its hull like tissue paper, igniting the ship's plasma reserves in a spectacular explosion. The passenger liner New Horizons had been converted into a missile carrier, its spacious cabins now filled with hundreds of nuclear warheads. When it launched its entire payload simultaneously, the missiles swarmed around the Draknari formation like angry insects, each one guided by an AI that seemed to possess an almost human-like vindictiveness. Impossible, Vextal repeated, her favorite word becoming inadequate to describe what they were witnessing. The coordination required for that maneuver would need weeks of planning and practice. Unless, Zexthal mused, they didn't plan it at all. Sir, look at the communication frequencies. The humans aren't following a predetermined strategy. They're improvising in real time, adapting their tactics moment by moment based on what they observe. It was true. The human fleet was fighting like a living thing, each ship responding to threats and opportunities as they arose, somehow managing to coordinate their actions without the rigid command structure that defined military doctrine across the galaxy. The second wave of Draknari attacks met with even more creative resistance. When a squadron of Draknari fighters attempted to exploit a gap in the human formation, they found themselves flying through a debris field that hadn't been their seconds before. The humans had apparently detonated several of their own damaged ships, creating a maze of twisted metal that their fighters could navigate, but the less agile Draknari craft could not. They're using their losses as weapons, Zexthal observed in fascination. One particularly audacious human captain had positioned his heavily damaged frigate Defiant directly in the path of a Draknari heavy cruiser. As the enemy ship approached, expecting an easy kill, the frigate's captain opened a direct communication channel. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Defiant," the human announced calmly. "My ship is dead in space, my crew is mostly dead, and I'm out of ammunition." The Draknari cruiser slowed, its captain probably wondering why this defeated enemy was bothering to communicate. "But I've still got a full nuclear reactor," Rodriguez continued, "and I've just disabled all the safety systems." The realization hit the Draknari captain a half-second before Rodriguez detonated his ship's power core. The explosion vaporized both vessels, but it also created an electromagnetic pulse that disabled 3 other Draknari ships, leaving them vulnerable to the swarm of human fighters that had somehow appeared exactly where they needed to be. "Magnificent," Zexthal whispered, using a word his species had almost forgotten. But the humans weren't finished demonstrating their capacity for impossible solutions. As the main Draknari fleet, led by the massive dreadnought Worldrender, approached Earth's orbital space, the human fleet did something that violated every principle of space combat. They retreated, not in panic or defeat, but in a coordinated withdrawal that drew the Draknari ships deeper into Earth's gravitational well. The humans were sacrificing their advantageous position in open space, voluntarily placing themselves in a worse tactical situation. "Have they lost their minds?" Bextal asked. "No," Zexthal replied, his respect for human tactical thinking growing by the minute. "They're using the planet itself as a weapon." As the Draknari fleet pursued the retreating humans into Earth's upper atmosphere, they encountered something that their sensors hadn't detected: a network of orbital defense platforms that had been powered down and hidden among the space debris that surrounded any inhabited world. The platforms activated simultaneously, revealing themselves to be massive electromagnetic railguns capable of accelerating tungsten projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. But instead of firing at the Draknari ships, they fired into the planet's upper atmosphere. The tungsten rods, superheated by atmospheric friction, created a web of incandescent destruction that turned Earth's sky into a battlefield where energy weapons lost efficiency and navigation systems failed. The Draknari, accustomed to fighting in the clean vacuum of space, suddenly found themselves operating in an environment that favored smaller, more agile craft. Human fighters, designed by a species that had learned to fly in atmosphere before reaching space, darted through the chaos like dolphins through water. They used the planet's magnetic field to mask their approach, employed gravity to assist their maneuvers, and demonstrated an understanding of three-dimensional combat that came from millennia of aerial warfare. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving another transmission from Admiral Chun." The human admiral appeared on screen, his uniform now torn and bloodied, his ship clearly damaged from the ongoing battle. But his eyes still held that unsettling intensity that had marked their first encounter. "To our observers," Chin said, his words punctuated by the rumble of weapons fire in the background, "you've now seen us fight an impossible battle against an unstoppable enemy. You've watched us turn our weaknesses into strengths and our desperation into strategy." An explosion somewhere on his ship sent sparks flying past the camera, but Chin didn't flinch. "But this is just the beginning, because we're not just fighting for our world anymore. We're fighting to show the universe that there's an alternative to surrender, an alternative to accepting that might makes right." The camera shook as another impact struck his vessel, and Chun had to grab the bulkhead to steady himself. "You want to know what makes humans dangerous?" he asked, looking directly at Zexthal through the screen. It's not our weapons or our technology. It's the fact that we've never learned when to quit. The transmission ended just as the world render emerged from the atmospheric chaos. Its massive form scarred, but still functional. Warlord Kesvak's flagship was the most powerful vessel in the Draknari fleet, armed with weapons capable of cracking continental plates and shielded by energy barriers that had never been breached. The human response was both utterly predictable and completely insane. Every remaining human ship in the system turned toward the dreadnought and began accelerating at maximum thrust. Not in attack formation, not with any apparent coordination, but in what could only be described as a suicidal charge. They're all going to ram it, Vextal realized in horror. No, Zexthal corrected, studying the tactical display with new understanding. They're going to give one of their number the chance to ram it. As the human fleet converged on the world render, the Draknari dreadnought unleashed its full firepower. Plasma bolts and particle beams lanced out in all directions, and human ships began dying by the dozens. But for every ship that exploded, two more took its place, and the surviving vessels continued their insane charge. The world render was simply too large and too well-armed to be overwhelmed by such primitive tactics. It would destroy the entire human fleet before any of them could get close enough to. Then Zexthal saw it. A single human ship, no larger than a Draknari shuttle, that had somehow survived the gauntlet of defensive fire. The little vessel was battered, leaking atmosphere, and clearly dying, but it was also only seconds away from the dreadnought's hull. That's impossible, Vextal breathed. The mathematical probability of any ship surviving the defensive barrage is less than the humans, Zexthal interrupted, have never been particularly concerned with mathematical probability. The small human ship struck the world render at approximately 60,000 kilometers per hour, carrying a nuclear warhead that detonated on impact. The explosion was spectacular, but insufficient to destroy a ship of the dreadnought size. But it wasn't meant to destroy the ship. It was meant to disable its shields. As the world render reeled from the impact, its defensive barriers flickering and failing, the real attack began. Hidden among Earth's orbital debris, automated systems that had been waiting in cold silence suddenly awakened. Hundreds of nuclear missiles, fired from concealed launchers across the planet's surface, converged on the now vulnerable dreadnought. The world render died as it had lived, violently, spectacularly, and with the kind of explosive force that would be visible from other star systems. In the aftermath, as the debris field expanded and the surviving Draknari ships fled in disorder, Commander Zexthal sat in stunned silence aboard the Silent Witness. His sensors showed impossible numbers. A human fleet that had been outgunned, outmanned, and outmatched had somehow achieved what every military analyst would declare impossible. They had won. Commander, Vextal's voice was barely a whisper. How do I write a report explaining what we just witnessed? Zexthal considered the question for a long moment, watching as human rescue ships moved among the debris, searching for survivors with the same determination they had shown in battle. I don't think you can, he admitted. I don't think anyone will believe it. 3 days after the Battle of Earth, Commander Zexthal found himself facing something he had never encountered in 3 millennia of service, a complete inability to write a coherent report. Every time he attempted to document the events he had witnessed, his analytical processors declared the data corrupted or impossible. How did one explain that a primitive species had defeated a galactic superpower through methods that shouldn't have worked? How did one describe tactics that violated every principle of military science, yet achieved decisive victory? Sir, Vextal interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving priority communications from the Collective Council. They're demanding an immediate preliminary report. Zexthal activated the long-range communication array, connecting to the council chambers on distant Kethmora Prime. The holographic images of 12 senior counselors materialized around him, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with impatience. Commander Zexthal spoke Council Prime Velnera, her ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. Your mission parameters were simple: observe and document the expected destruction of the human species. Yet your preliminary data transmissions contain inconsistencies. Honored Council Prime, Zexthal began carefully. The inconsistencies arise from the fact that our predictions were incorrect. The humans were not destroyed. They achieved total victory over the Draknari fleet. The silence that followed was profound. Several counselors' bioluminescent displays flickered rapidly, the Kethmori equivalent of shocked disbelief. Impossible, declared Counselor Thexmol, his expertise in military analysis lending weight to his words. We reviewed the tactical assessments. The Draknari possessed overwhelming advantages in every measurable category. That is correct, Honored Counselor, Zexthal replied. However, it appears the humans do not operate according to measurable categories. He transmitted the raw sensor data from the battle, knowing that the counselors would need to review the evidence before they could accept such an unprecedented outcome. While they analyzed the information, Zexthal's attention was drawn to movement in Earth's orbital space. Human ships were arriving from across their solar system, not military vessels. These were explorers, scientists, diplomats, and curious civilians who had heard about the visitors observing their world. Within hours, the space around the Silent Witness was filled with dozens of human craft, all maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly eager to make contact. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving hundreds of transmission requests from the human vessels. They're requesting formal diplomatic contact. That's unusual, Vextal observed. Most species that detect our presence attempt to hide or flee. Before Zexthal could respond, an unauthorized transmission penetrated their communication systems. Their screens flickered to life, showing a human woman with graying hair and kind eyes, wearing what appeared to be civilian clothing. Hello there, she said, as if greeting neighbors over a garden fence. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, xenolinguist and self-appointed first contact specialist. I hope you don't mind me hacking your communication systems, but we're all terribly excited to meet you properly. Zexthal stared at the screen in bewilderment. In the collective's extensive first contact protocols, there was no provision for the observed species initiating communication with their observers. We know you've been watching us, Dr. Hawthorne continued cheerfully, and want to thank you for not interfering during our little disagreement with the Draknari. Though I suspect you didn't think we needed help, did you? The woman's smile was both knowing and amused, as if she was sharing a private joke. The thing is, we humans are naturally curious about our neighbors. We've detected at least 17 different technological signatures in this system over the past week, which suggests there's a much larger galactic community out there. We'd very much like to learn about it. Zexthal found himself responding before he could consider the diplomatic implications. Dr. Hawthorne, I am Commander Zexthal of the Kethmori Collective. We are neutral observers, tasked with documenting the development and conflicts of emerging species. Fascinating. Dr. Hawthorne's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. A galactic anthropological service. How wonderfully civilized. Tell me, Commander, in all your observations, have you ever seen a battle quite like the one we just fought? The question struck at the heart of Zexthal's confusion. No, Dr. Hawthorne. Your species employs tactical methodologies that appear to exist outside established military doctrine. That's probably because we made most of it up as we went along, she replied with a laugh. Humans are excellent improvisers. It comes from being a young species that's had to survive on a rather dangerous planet. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the Collective Council. Council Prime Velnara's image appeared alongside Dr. Hawthorne, creating a surreal diplomatic triangle. Commander, the Council Prime's voice carried undertones of deep concern. We have completed our analysis of your sensor data. The implications are troubling. Dr. Hawthorne tilted her head with interest. Oh, hello there. You must be Commander Zexthal's supervisor. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, pleased to meet you. I was just telling the commander about human improvisation. The Council Prime's bioluminescent display flickered in patterns Zexthal had never seen before. You can see our communication? Well, yes, Dr. Hawthorne replied matter-of-factly. Your encryption is quite sophisticated, but human computers are very good at pattern recognition. We cracked it about an hour ago. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Zexthal watched in amazement as one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy struggled to respond to a human xenolinguist who had just casually announced that her species had broken collective communication protocols in the span of a single afternoon. This is precisely what concerns us, Council Prime Velnara continued, regaining her composure. Commander Zexthal, your report indicates that humans possess technological capabilities that should not exist at their current development level. Actually, Dr. Hawthorne interjected politely. If I may clarify, we don't possess superior technology. We're just very good at using our inferior technology in ways its designers never intended. She gestured to something off-screen, and her image split to show a tactical display of the recent battle. Take our victory over the Draknari, for instance. Their ships were faster, stronger, and better armed than ours in every measurable way. But they were also designed according to rigid principles that assumed their enemies would behave logically. The display showed the battle from multiple angles, highlighting moments where human actions had defied tactical logic. We won because we cheated, Dr. Hawthorne explained cheerfully. We used weapons in ways they weren't designed for, employed formations that shouldn't have worked, and coordinated our efforts through pure intuition rather than formal command structures. Council Prime Velnara's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns indicating deep unease. Dr. Hawthorne, what you describe suggests a fundamental incompatibility with established galactic civilization. Order, predictability, and logical behavior are the foundations of peaceful coexistence among starfaring species. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, Dr. Hawthorne replied with a wave of her hand. Humans are quite capable of order and logic when the situation calls for it. We just don't limit ourselves to those approaches when faced with existential threats. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. The truth is, Council Prime, we humans have survived on our homeworld for millions of years by being adaptable. We've faced ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and countless other disasters by refusing to accept that any situation is truly hopeless. Zexthal found himself leaning forward, captivated by the human's explanation. We don't see obstacles, Dr. Hawthorne continued. We see puzzles to be solved. We don't see superior enemies. We see opponents who haven't yet discovered their weaknesses. This isn't aggression or warmongering, Commander. It's simply how we're built. The implications of her words sent ripples of concern through Zexthal's consciousness. If humans approached all challenges with the same creative flexibility they had demonstrated in battle, what would happen when they encountered the broader galactic community? As if reading his thoughts, Dr. Hawthorne smiled. I imagine you're wondering what we'll do now that we know we're not alone in the universe. She gestured again, and the display shifted to show human ships already departing Earth's orbital space, heading toward the outer system where the battle had taken place. We're going to explore, Commander. We're going to meet our neighbors. We're going to learn everything we can about galactic civilization and find our place within it. Her expression brightened, and we're going to do it all with the same enthusiasm we brought to defending our home. Council Prime Velnara's communication ended abruptly, leaving Zexthal alone with the remarkable human xenolinguist. But before either could speak, the tactical display lit up with new contacts approaching the system. Sir, the sensor operator reported multiple fleets entering the outer system. Collective identification codes indicate representatives from 47 different species. Dr. Hawthorne raised an eyebrow. Word travels fast in the galaxy, doesn't it? Zexthal studied the incoming ships with growing apprehension. Kruger war fleets, Zenthori exploration vessels, Vorthan diplomatic cruisers, and dozens of others, many of them species that the collective had never seen cooperating before. Dr. Hawthorne, he said carefully, I believe your species has attracted significant attention throughout the galaxy. Well, she replied philosophically, I suppose defeating the Draknari Empire in a single battle would tend to do that. Tell me, Commander, are these visitors here as friends or potential threats? Before Zexthal could answer, his communication system activated again. This time, the caller was someone who made even the Council Prime seem approachable. Fleet Marshal Corzin of the Kruger hegemony, one of the galaxy's most aggressive military powers. The Kruger appeared on screen, his insectoid features twisted in what might have been a smile or a threat display. Humans of Earth, he declared, his translated words carrying undertones of challenge. I am Fleet Marshal Corzin. The Kruger hegemony demands to know how you achieved victory over the Draknari. Dr. Hawthorne studied the new arrival with the same calm interest she had shown everyone else. Hello, Fleet Marshal. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, representing Earth. We achieved victory through superior tactics, stubborn determination, and a certain amount of calculated insanity. Corzin's mandibles clicked in what Zexthal recognized as Kruger surprise. You mock the Kruger? Not at all, Dr. Hawthorne replied sincerely. I'm simply answering your question honestly. Would you prefer that I lie? The directness of her response seemed to confuse the Fleet Marshal, whose species prided itself on complex diplomatic protocols and ritualized communication. The Kruger do not understand, Corzin admitted after a moment. How does insanity defeat superior technology? Dr. Hawthorne's smile returned. Would you like us to show you? The offer hung in space between the ships, loaded with implications that Zexthal could barely begin to process. A species that had existed in the galaxy for less than a standard day was offering to demonstrate military tactics to one of the region's major powers. You would share tactical information? Corzin asked, his mandibles clicking rapidly with what Zexthal now recognized as excitement rather than aggression. Fleet Marshal, Dr. Hawthorne replied, humans believe that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. If you're genuinely interested in learning how we defend ourselves, we'd be happy to explain our methods. She paused, then added with characteristic human directness. Of course, we'd expect the same courtesy in return. Cultural exchange, after all, should benefit everyone involved. Zexthal watched in fascination as other ships began requesting communication access. The Zenthori wanted to discuss human exploration techniques. The Vorthan were curious about human political structures. Even the notoriously reclusive Eldari had sent a science vessel to investigate these newcomers who had reshaped galactic power dynamics in a single afternoon. Dr. Hawthorne, Zexthal said quietly. I fear your species may have initiated the largest diplomatic upheaval in galactic history. Oh, I certainly hope so, she replied enthusiastically. It was getting rather boring, wasn't it? Everyone staying in their own little corners of space, following the same old patterns, never trying anything new or exciting. She gestured toward the growing fleet of alien visitors. Look at all of this. Dozens of species that normally avoid each other, all gathered here because they're curious about us. When's the last time something like this happened? Zexthal consulted his historical databases. Approximately 14,000 standard years ago, when the collective first established the neutral observation protocols. Exactly. Dr. Hawthorne clapped her hands together. It's time for something new, don't you think? Time for the galaxy to remember that there are always new possibilities, new ways of thinking, new solutions to old problems. As if summoned by her words, another transmission arrived. This one came from Admiral Chun, whose battered but victorious fleet was escorting a convoy of what appeared to be disabled Draknari vessels toward Earth. Dr. Hawthorne, the Admiral said, we've got 47 Draknari survivors who surrendered after the battle. They're requesting asylum and want to defect from the Empire. Dr. Hawthorne's expression brightened even further. How wonderful! Our first refugees. Commander Zexthal, would the collective happen to have any protocols for this sort of situation? Zexthal accessed his databases and found himself once again confronting the unprecedented. Dr. Hawthorne, in the history of galactic civilization, no one has ever successfully defeated the Draknari Empire. No protocols exist for processing Draknari defectors because such a scenario was considered impossible. Well then, Dr. Hawthorne said with characteristic human optimism, I suppose we'll just have to make it up as we go along. We're quite good at that. As Zexthal watched more ships arrive and more communication requests flood their systems, he realized that his simple observation mission had become something far more complex. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had shattered the established order of galactic civilization. And from the look in Dr. Hawthorne's eyes, they were just getting started. 2 weeks after first contact, Commander Zexthal found himself stationed permanently in the Sol system, no longer as an observer, but as the collective's official liaison to humanity. The transformation had been necessary as Earth rapidly became the most important diplomatic center in the galaxy. The space around Earth now resembled a floating city. Representatives from over 60 species had established temporary stations in orbit, each trying to understand these remarkable newcomers who had rewritten the rules of galactic politics overnight. The humans, true to their nature, had welcomed them all with a mixture of curiosity and barely contained excitement. Commander, Vextal reported, materializing beside him on the observation deck of their newly expanded facility. The morning briefing is ready. We have developments. Zexthal activated the tactical display, which now showed a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. Red markers indicated areas of unprecedented activity, and there were far too many of them for his comfort. Tell me, he said wearily, the human exploration fleet launched yesterday has already made contact with 3 previously uncharted species, Vextal began. They've established trade agreements with 2 of them and are currently mediating a territorial dispute for the 3rd. Zexthal studied the data with growing amazement. How is that possible? Standard first contact protocols require months of careful observation before any direct communication. The humans, Vextal replied with what might have been amusement, apparently consider standard protocols to be suggestions rather than rules. Captain Sarah Chun, Admiral Chin's daughter, made first contact with the Calax by sharing her lunch with them. Her lunch? The Calax are a hive-minded insect species that communicates primarily through chemical exchanges. Captain Shen offered them a sandwich containing various earth spices. The chemical complexity fascinated them so much that they declared humans to be creators of impossible flavors and granted them immediate diplomatic immunity throughout Calax space. Zexthol processed this information with difficulty, and the territorial dispute, two species called the Rokari and the Theshan were fighting over a mineral-rich asteroid field. The humans convinced them to establish a joint mining operation by demonstrating something they call cooperative competition. I'm afraid to ask. They organized an asteroid mining contest. Whichever species could extract more ore in a standard day would get primary rights to the field. Both species worked so hard trying to outdo each other that they extracted more resources in one day than either had managed in the previous year. When the humans pointed out how much more they could accomplish by cooperating rather than fighting, both species immediately signed a joint venture agreement. Zexthol felt his probability processors struggling once again. Let me understand this correctly. Humans resolved a century-old territorial conflict through an organized competition. With prizes, Vextal added. Captain Chun presented both sides with trophy cups manufactured on Earth. Apparently, the physical token of achievement was so novel that both species now consider the cups to be their most valuable diplomatic artifacts. Before Zexthol could fully process this development, his communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne appeared on screen, but she was no longer on Earth. The background showed what appeared to be the interior of a Kruger warship. "Commander Zexthol," she called out cheerfully. "I hope you're well. I'm currently aboard the Death's Edge with Fleet Marshal Corzin, and we've had the most fascinating breakthrough." Zexthol could see Kruger warriors in the background, and, to his astonishment, they appeared to be laughing. Kruger didn't laugh. Their physiology didn't even support the concept of humor. "Dr. Hawthorne," Zexthol said carefully, "are you safe?" "Oh, perfectly safe. The Kruger are wonderful hosts once you understand their psychology. It turns out they're not actually aggressive. They're just terminally bored." Fleet Marshal Corzin appeared beside Dr. Hawthorne, his insectoid features arranged in what was unmistakably a grin. "Commander Zexthol," the Kruger leader said, "humans are magnificent. They have shown us warfare as art rather than simple destruction." "I'm sorry, what?" Dr. Hawthorne's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "The Kruger have been conquering worlds for centuries because military excellence is their highest cultural value. But they've never had opponents who could challenge them creatively. They weren't destroying civilizations out of malice. They were desperately seeking worthy adversaries." She gestured toward a tactical display showing simulated battle scenarios. "So we introduced them to the concept of war games. Competitive military exercises where both sides try to outmaneuver each other without actually causing destruction." Corzin's mandibles clicked with excitement. "The humans create scenarios of impossible complexity. Yesterday, they challenged us to capture a space station defended by civilian ships using only non-lethal weapons. The tactical creativity required was exquisite." And Dr. Hawthorne added with obvious pride, "The Kruger won by creating a mock siege using magnetic grapples and simulation rounds. They managed to capture the station without causing a single casualty. They're absolute artists when they're not actually trying to kill anyone." Zexthol found himself experiencing something his species had eliminated from their psychology millennia ago. Complete bewilderment mixed with grudging admiration. "Dr. Hawthorne," he said slowly, "are you telling me that you've convinced the galaxy's most feared military power to give up conquest in favor of games?" Not games, Corzin corrected, his translated voice carrying undertones of deep satisfaction. Competition. Humans understand that true warriors seek worthy challenges, not easy victories. They have given the Kruger what we have sought for 1,000 years, opponents who fight with honor and creativity. The implication struck Zexthal like a physical blow. If the Kruger hegemony abandons territorial expansion in favor of competitive military exercises, the entire balance of galactic power shifts. Vextal finished his thought. The Kruger were the primary military threat that kept dozens of smaller species aligned with the major powers. Without that threat, another communication request interrupted them, this one from the distant Zenthori Confederation. The Zenthori were one of the galaxy's oldest and most traditional civilizations, known for their careful, methodical approach to everything. The being who appeared on screen was Ambassador Thelwyn, whose ancient features bore an expression of profound confusion. Commander Zexthal, the Zenthori said in his careful, formal manner, we require immediate clarification regarding human diplomatic protocols. Of course, Ambassador. What seems to be the problem? We have been negotiating a standard trade agreement with the humans for 7 standard days. Our projections indicated the process would require at least 6 months of careful consideration and formal review. Zexthal nodded. That is consistent with Zenthori practices. The humans, Thelwyn continued, his confusion evident, completed their review in 14 minutes and signed the agreement immediately. When we inquired about their hastiness, they said they trusted us and that the terms seemed fair to everyone. That seems problematic? Commander, the ambassador's voice carried a note of distress. In 47,000 years of Zenthori civilization, no species has ever described our trade proposals as fair to everyone. We spend decades ensuring that every clause maximally benefits our interests while remaining technically acceptable to our partners. And the humans? They reviewed our proposal, identified 17 areas where we had gained unfair advantage, and suggested modifications that would make the agreement more equitable. When we protested that this would reduce our profit margins, they said, Thelwyn paused, apparently struggling with the concept. They said that sustainable partnerships were more valuable than short-term gains. Zexthal felt his worldview shifting again. Ambassador, are you saying that humans voluntarily reduce their own benefits to make your trade agreement more fair? Precisely. And when we attempted to reciprocate by offering them additional concessions, they declined, stating that the revised terms were balanced, and that balance was more important than maximum advantage. The communication ended with Ambassador Thelwyn looking like a being whose fundamental assumptions about the universe have been shaken. Zexthal could relate to the feeling. Sir, Vextal reported, we're receiving similar reports from across the galaxy. Human diplomatic teams are achieving unprecedented success by simply being honest about their intentions and seeking mutually beneficial outcomes. That shouldn't work, Zexthal protested weakly. And yet it does. The Vorthan Empire has agreed to open their trade routes to human exploration vessels. The Eldery Collective has invited human scientists to study their biotechnology. Even the Synthetic Assembly has expressed interest in cultural exchange. Zexthal reviewed the data streaming in from across human space. In 2 weeks, humanity had accomplished more diplomatic progress than most species achieved in centuries. They were breaking every rule of galactic politics and somehow making everything work better as a result. There's more, sir, Vextal continued. The Draknari defectors have been providing intelligence about their empire's internal structure. It appears that Emperor Vexnatha's regime is extremely unpopular among the Draknari population. That's not surprising. Military dictatorships rarely maintain popular support indefinitely. The humans have proposed something they call a liberation campaign, not a military conquest, but a program to support Draknari independence movements throughout the empire. Zexthul felt his sensors recalibrate themselves automatically. They want to destabilize the Draknari Empire? No, sir. They want to democratize it. They're planning to broadcast something they call education programs throughout Draknari space. Information about alternative government structures, individual rights, and self-determination. And the collective's response to this proposal? The council is divided. Half believe the humans are dangerously naive and will destabilize the entire galactic order. The other half think they're revolutionary geniuses who might actually create a more stable and peaceful galaxy. As if summoned by their conversation, Council Prime Velnara's image materialized in the communication array. Her bioluminescent patterns were cycling through configurations Zexthul had never seen before. "Commander," she said without preamble, "we need to discuss the human situation immediately. Their activities are creating ripple effects throughout the galaxy that our predictive models cannot accommodate. Council Prime, I've been documenting their methods extensively. While unconventional, their results appear to be uniformly positive. That's precisely the problem, Commander. No species achieves universally positive outcomes in interstellar diplomacy. There are always winners and losers, conflicts of interest, incompatible goals. The humans appear to be creating scenarios where everyone benefits, which should be mathematically impossible." Zexthul considered this carefully. "Perhaps, Council Prime, our mathematical models are incomplete." The silence that followed was profound. In the 3,000-year history of the Kethmori Collective, no one had ever suggested that their analytical methods might be fundamentally flawed. "Explain," Velnara said finally. "The humans operate on assumptions that we've never incorporated into our models. They believe that most conflicts arise from misunderstanding rather than incompatible interests. They assume that other species are generally well-intentioned unless proven otherwise. And, most importantly, they approach every situation with the conviction that creative solutions exist for apparently impossible problems." Zexthul paused, organizing his thoughts. "We spent millennia documenting galactic civilization based on the assumption that competition, conflict, and zero-sum outcomes are natural laws. But what if they're simply learned behaviors? What if the humans are showing us that cooperation and mutual benefit are more natural than we ever imagined?" Council Prime Velnara's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns indicating deep contemplation. "Commander, you're suggesting that 3,000 years of collective observation may have been based on fundamentally incorrect premises. I'm suggesting, Council Prime, that the humans have introduced variables into galactic civilization that we didn't know existed. Variables that appear to be changing everything." Before the Council Prime could respond, another priority transmission arrived. This time, it was Admiral Chun, transmitting from the edge of the solar system. "Commander Zexthul, Dr. Hawthorne, Council Prime Velnara," the Admiral said formally, "we've received a message from Emperor Vexnath of the Draknari Empire. He's demanding the return of his defectors and threatening to invade Earth if we refuse." Zexthul felt his probability processors engage automatically. "Admiral, surely you won't risk another confrontation so soon after—" "Oh, we're not going to fight him," Admiral Chun interrupted with a smile that reminded Zexthul uncomfortably of Dr. Hawthorne's expression during their first meeting. "We're going to invite him to dinner." "You're what?" Dr. Hawthorne suggested it, and the more we thought about it, the more sense it made. Emperor Vexnoth has spent his entire life surrounded by subjects who either fear him or want to replace him. He's probably never had an honest conversation with anyone. The Admiral's smile broadened. So we're going to offer him something no one else can. The chance to talk to people who aren't afraid of him and don't want anything from him except honest dialogue. As the transmission ended, Zexthul realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans weren't just changing diplomatic protocols or military tactics. They were challenging the fundamental assumptions that governed how intelligent species related to each other. And somehow, impossibly, was working. Council Prime, he said quietly, I believe we're going to need new analytical models. 6 months after first contact, Commander Zexthul stood aboard the newly constructed Earth diplomatic station, watching through the massive viewport as the most unprecedented gathering in galactic history unfolded before him. Ships from over 200 species filled the space around Earth, representing every major civilization and dozens of minor ones that had never before participated in galactic politics. They had come for the Galactic Cooperation Summit, humanity's audacious proposal to restructure interstellar relations based on principles that most species had considered naive at best, impossible at worst. Yet somehow, the humans had convinced nearly every major power to attend. Commander, Vextal reported, her form materializing beside him. Emperor Vexnoth's flagship has just entered the outer system. Zexthul studied the massive Draknari vessel approaching Earth. 6 months ago, that ship's arrival would have signaled the beginning of a devastating war. Today, it represented something far more complex. How many escort vessels? He asked. None, sir. The Emperor is traveling alone, as requested. The transformation of Emperor Vexnoth over the past months have been one of the most startling developments in the ongoing human revolution. What had begun as a simple dinner invitation had evolved into a series of unprecedented diplomatic exchanges that had shaken the Draknari Empire to its foundations. Dr. Hawthorne materialized on the communication screen, transmitting from the diplomatic reception area where she was greeting arriving dignitaries. Commander Zexthul, she called out warmly. Are you watching Vexnoth's arrival? Isn't it wonderful? 6 months ago, he was threatening to glass our planet, and now he's coming to discuss mutual defense agreements. Through the screen, Zexthul could see a remarkable sight. Representatives from dozens of species mingling freely in the reception area, sharing meals, exchanging cultural artifacts, and engaging in animated conversations. The scene would have been impossible under traditional diplomatic protocols, which required careful separation of potentially hostile species. Dr. Hawthorne, Zexthul said, I still don't understand how you convinced him to attend peacefully. Her smile carried the warmth that had become her trademark across the galaxy. Oh, that wasn't difficult at all. We simply listened to him. Do you know that in 47 years as Emperor, Vexnoth had never once had a conversation with someone who wasn't either terrified of him or plotting against him? She gestured to something off-screen, and the camera shifted to show Emperor Vexnoth himself, the massive reptilian leader deep in conversation with a group of Zinthori diplomats. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, a stark contrast to the rigid military bearing he had displayed during their first encounter. It turns out, Dr. Hawthorne continued, that most so-called tyrants are just lonely people in positions of power who've never learned healthy ways to relate to others. Once we showed Vexnoth that he could gain respect through cooperation rather than fear, he became one of our most enthusiastic supporters. Zexthul watched as the former emperor shared what appeared to be a joke with his companions, his translator rendering rough Draknari laughter as warm human chuckles. The internal reforms he's implemented in the Empire have been remarkable, Dr. Hawthorne added. Democratic representation individual rights protections, economic cooperation programs with former enemy species. He's become quite the progressive leader, and his military forces, retraining as disaster relief specialists and exploration teams. Turns out that military discipline and organization make excellent foundations for humanitarian work. The Kruger have been helping with the transition. They've developed quite an expertise in converting conquest skills into construction skills. As if summoned by her words, Fleet Marshal Corzin appeared on another screen, transmitting from the Kruger training facility that had been established in Earth's outer system. Commander Zexthal, the Kruger leader's mandibles clicked with enthusiasm. You must observe our latest achievement. We have successfully converted 17 Draknari assault battalions into rapid response rescue teams. The display shifted to show Draknari and Kruger forces working together to conduct evacuation drills, their movements precise and coordinated but focused on preservation rather than destruction. The tactical complexity of disaster relief, Corzin continued, exceeds that of simple warfare by several orders of magnitude. We must coordinate multiple species, adapt to unknown environmental hazards, and achieve mission success with zero acceptable casualties. It is magnificent. Zexthal found himself once again struggling to process the implications of what he was witnessing. Two of the galaxy's most aggressive military powers had transformed themselves into humanitarian organizations, and they were absolutely thriving in their new roles. Sir, Vextal reported, Council Prime Velnara is requesting immediate conference. She says the preliminary analysis of the human impact on galactic civilization is complete. The Council Prime's image appeared on the main screen, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through configurations that Zexthal had learned to recognize as profound amazement mixed with scientific excitement. Commander, she began without preamble, we need to discuss the fundamental revision of collective analytical protocols. The human presence has created changes that extend far beyond simple diplomatic realignment. How extensive are the changes, Council Prime? In 6 months, humans have resolved 4 major territorial disputes, converted 2 military empires into cooperative alliances, established trade relationships between 37 previously hostile species, and created the first truly inclusive galactic governmental body in recorded history. She paused, her patterns shifting to indicate the kind of or reserve for phenomena that challenged basic understanding. More significantly, Commander, they've demonstrated that our core assumptions about intelligent species behavior were incomplete. We based 3 millennia of observation on the premise that conflict and competition were inevitable consequences of limited resources and incompatible goals. And now we understand that conflict and competition are learned behaviors that can be modified through education, communication, and creative problem solving. The humans haven't eliminated these behaviors. They've channeled them into constructive rather than destructive applications. Zexthal considered this revelation. Council Prime, are you saying that the collective's role as neutral observers may no longer be necessary? I'm saying, Commander, that the humans have created a model for galactic civilization that makes our services as conflict documentarians potentially obsolete. Instead of observing the rise and fall of civilizations, we may need to learn how to help them rise and stay risen. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement echoing throughout the diplomatic station. Admiral Chen's voice, now recognized across the galaxy as the herald of important developments, filled the communication channels. Representatives of galactic civilization, the Admiral began, we are ready to begin the opening session of the Cooperation Summit. Please proceed to the main assembly hall. Zexthal made his way through corridors filled with beings he would never have imagined seeing in the same space. Elderly scientists discussed biotechnology applications with synthetic assembly representatives. Vorthan traders compared notes with human economists. Kalak's hive minds shared complex chemical communications with anyone willing to sample their latest flavor combinations. The main assembly hall was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Different sections had been designed to accommodate the environmental needs of various species, while a central common area allowed for direct interaction among those who could tolerate similar conditions. The sight of so many different forms of intelligence gathered peacefully in one space was unprecedented in galactic history. Dr. Hawthorne took the central podium, her small human frame somehow commanding the attention of beings who could have crushed her without effort. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying clearly through universal translators, "6 months ago, most of you had never heard of humanity. Today, we gather not as strangers or potential enemies, but as neighbors seeking to build a better future for all our species." She gestured toward the diverse assembly. "Each of you has come here because you've seen what becomes possible when we choose cooperation over conflict, creativity over rigid tradition, hope over fear. Together, we've demonstrated that the galaxy can be a place where every species thrives rather than merely survives." Emperor Vexnoth rose from his seat, his massive form commanding attention. "Dr. Hawthorne speaks truth," he declared, his translated voice carrying undertones of deep conviction. "The Draknari Empire spent 1,000 years conquering worlds, believing that strength came from domination. In 6 months working with humans, we have discovered that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than tearing them down." Fleet Marshal Corzin's mandibles clicked agreement. The Kruger sought worthy opponents for centuries. Humans showed us that the greatest opposition comes not from enemies, but from the challenges of creation, exploration, and protection of the innocent. Ambassador Felwyn of the Zenthori stood next, his ancient features bearing an expression of wonder. "In 47,000 years of careful, methodical progress, my people accomplished much. In 6 months of human-inspired cooperation, we have accomplished more than in our entire previous history." One by one, representatives from across the galaxy rose to share similar testimonials. The pattern was consistent. Species that had spent millennia following rigid doctrines of competition and conflict had discovered new purposes and achievements through human-inspired cooperation. Dr. Hawthorne waited until all who wished to speak had shared their experiences. Then, she returned to the podium with an expression that Zexthal had learned to associate with particularly ambitious human proposals. "My friends," she said, "we've proven that cooperation works. We've demonstrated that creative solutions exist for problems that seem impossible. We've shown that every species in this galaxy has valuable contributions to make." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle across the assembly. "Now I want to propose something even more ambitious. I want to propose that we formalize these principles into a new structure for galactic civilization. Not a government that rules from above, but a cooperative network that serves from within." The display screens around the hall activated, showing a three-dimensional model of proposed governmental structure unlike anything in galactic history. "The Galactic Cooperation Council, DR," Hawthorne explained, "will be based on voluntary participation, mutual benefit, and rotating leadership. Every species would contribute according to their strengths and receive support according to their needs." Zexthal studied the proposed structure with growing amazement. It incorporated elements of democracy, federation, guild cooperation, and mutual aid society into something entirely new. The council would have no power to command or control, Dr. Hawthorne continued. It would exist solely to facilitate communication, coordinate voluntary cooperation, and provide support for species facing challenges that exceed their individual capabilities. She gestured toward the assembly. Disaster relief coordinated by reformed Kruger and Draknari forces. Scientific research shared freely among Eldari, Xanthori, and human scientists. Trade facilitated by Vortha networks and human innovation. Exploration supported by combined fleets from every member species. The hall buzzed with translated conversation as representatives discussed the proposal among themselves. Zexthul could detect no opposition, only excitement and refinement of details. Emperor Vexnoth was the first to speak. The Draknari Empire formally requests membership in this cooperation council. We pledge our reformed military forces to the service of galactic peace and mutual aid. Fleet Marshal Corzin's response was immediate. The Kruger hegemony seconds this proposal. We offer our expertise in logistics and coordination to support council operations. One by one, every species represented at the summit formally joined the proposed council. Even the most traditionally isolationist civilizations agreed to participate, drawn by the promise of mutual benefit without loss of autonomy. Dr. Hawthorne accepted each pledge with the same warm smile that had started this revolution. When the last representative had spoken, she turned to address Commander Zexthul directly. "Commander," she said, "the Cooperation Council would be honored to include the Kethmori Collective as founding members. Your expertise and observation